Alright, I know it's relatively dark in here. Not the best place for this. Apologize for that, for one thing, and then I apologize for this snake I have on my neck. She's my pet, and I like to have her around, so I apologize if that creeps you out. What am I going to start? Getting a little stir crazy, because it's Wednesday. No, it's Tuesday, and on Monday, less than a week from now, well, Thursday morning, I get to go out of town to Denver just to hang out, I guess. And then on the Monday after that, I get to go back to school for the semester, which hopefully will be awesome. Anyway, I'm just totally crazy. I have a lot of videos I want to make though. This is going to be basically a video about the article by Alvin Plantinga. Well, yeah, I believe it's an article, but here, let me get to it here. It's in this book. I've used this one so much. See how tattered it is. Philosophy of Religion, an anthology by Poyman and Ray. Not the free will defense, but religious belief without evidence is what I'm looking for. Yeah, it's called. Yeah, here we go. Okay, here it is. Okay, yeah. It's from a compilation called Rationality and Religious Belief, edited by Delaney. But the article is called Religious Belief Without Evidence. Now, I read this about a month ago, and I did a paper on this, plus William Alston's article called, I forget what it's called, but it was along the lines of religious epistemology. Now, I did a video, like a little primer on this religious epistemology thing, so I could move into this, and now I am. So, okay, this is basically going to be on epistemology. It's basically a religious epistemology in that it is a religious epistemological defense of the rationality of faith, the rationality of faith in God, in belief in God. So this is hard. I'm not saying difficult, but it's hard epistemology that is turned towards the structure of our beliefs about faith and about God. Okay. First off, I'm kind of trying to do this as quickly. He kind of questions is belief in God rational? And normally, if you talk to any typical atheist, they will just say, no, it is not rational because it's not based on things empirical. It's not based on empirical evidence that is seen in the world. It's like if you talk to most atheists, like even if you talk to the amazing atheists on YouTube, or Emendum on YouTube, those are just, the Amazing Atheist is a very popular atheist YouTuber, and Emendum is a very popular antinatalist YouTuber. So if you want to, they're very staunch in their beliefs, and they, most YouTubers that I run into are not Christian and they're not religious, and they will say, no, it is not rational, it is not reasonable, or it's not reasonably acceptable to believe in a God because there is no evidence for it. There's no evidence that we see with our eyes that warrants and backs this belief that we have in a God, or what some would call a sky daddy. This article here kind of goes against that. The looking at the structure of our beliefs and the epistemic relations. And these atheists demand demonstrations or proofs of why they demand sufficient evidence as to why one is going to believe in this. And then if you talk about Roe, he has an inductive argument against God's existence via the problem of evil, which I have a video on, I believe. He kind of goes via. He kind of talks about there's friendly atheism and there's non-friendly atheism, which he kind of takes a friendly atheism stance. Philosophers who think there are sound arguments for the existence of God, the natural theologians, claim that there is good evidence for this proposition. Philosophers who believe that there are sound arguments for the non-existence of God naturally claim that there is evidence against this proposition. So then he does talk about, Plantinga does kind of hold this thing that, now he kind of talks about this thing not only in this but in the free will defense, also in this collection. He asks the question: is natural theology useful? Natural theology is kind of what a Christian apologeticist does. He kind of like William Lane Craig and J.P. Moreland, those guys. If you watch the channel on YouTube called Religion Philosophy, there's they have various videos, tons of videos that they upload on a regular basis from William Lane Craig, various other Christian apologetics people, and also various atheists, which they showed that these atheists to be wrong, which I have disagree with them on this, but that's another issue. Natural theology is basically the traditional arguments for and against God's existence, mostly for. The against is the atheological stance. What he says in this as well as other articles is that natural theology is mostly useless. It doesn't really have a whole lot of use in that. If you say to a Christian, Christians are people who are gonna believe what they're gonna believe based on their faith, not by an argument, not by something they've seen, more so by something they felt, which leads to a stronger faith than even the original emotional feeling or experience. So he kind of says that kind of thing, the basic arguments of the cosmological, teleological, and ontological arguments are kind of not a very good thing, especially if you're a theist and you're trying to give your position, or if you're atheist trying to argue against the theist, because you're not really going to get a theist to change their position. Okay. He talks about W.K. Clifford. Clifford finds it utterly obvious, furthermore, that those who believe in God do not indeed believe on insufficient evidence, and thus deserve the above abuse. So he's talking about this stuff here. Let me get to the heart of epistemology. Okay, talk about noetic structure. Okay. According to the Cliffordian position, then there is a set of prepositions E, such that my belief in God is rational if and only if it is evident, with respect to E, if and only if E constitutes on the balance evidence for it. So that's the Clifford position. I'm not going to read Clifford and make people not really going to talk so much about Clifford. What is essential to Clifford's argument is that the claim that we must evaluate the rationality of belief in God by examining its relation to other propositions. So it's kind of like what he kind of talks about is epistemic relations, not only between beliefs themselves, but between the beliefs and the person. Okay. So we're talking about. He does this via kind of foundationalism, classical foundationalism. If you don't know what that is, that's an epistemological theory that says that there are basic beliefs that don't need any further justification or meta beliefs to justify that belief. And in this article, he goes on and he talks about whether beliefs, faith beliefs, rational beliefs, or beliefs in God are foundational, basic, or if they're discursive or non-basic. A non-basic belief needs other meta beliefs to justify it, and foundationalism goes like this and then on upward. Basic beliefs hooking together like this, and then they build upward towards non-basic beliefs, and those non-basic beliefs are justified by previous non-basic beliefs and thus other basic beliefs. Okay, beliefs that are not rationally accepted are only on the basis of evidence, where the evidence must trace back ultimately to what is properly basic. That's basically the idea of a foundationalist stance. Okay, and he kind of he says, I think we can understand foundationalism more fully if we introduce the idea of a noetic structure. A person's noetic structure is the set of propositions he believes, together with the certain epistemic relations that hold among him and those propositions. So that's what a noetic structure is. Your system of beliefs and the epistemic relation between those beliefs and yourself. So he kind of gives out these various kind of different things, these different kind of things that are used to look at a noetic structure. On account of a person's noetic structure, then, would specify which of his beliefs are basic and which are non-basic. Suppose I seem to see a tree. I have that characteristic, sort of experience that goes with perceiving it. That's an externalism. He kind of brings up this issue about about the notion of proper basicality. Let's see. We have an account of a noetic structure will include what we might call an index of degree of belief. I hold some beliefs much more firmly than others. I believe both that 2 + 1 = 3, and that London, England, is north of Saskatchewan. But I believe the former more resolutely than the latter. So some beliefs are believed in a higher degree than others. Thus, more beliefs are, some beliefs are more basic-like than the others. Next we have a somewhat vaguer notion. On account of S's, a person's noetic structure would include something like an index of depth of ingression. Some of my beliefs are, we might say, on the periphery of my noetic structure. I accept them and may even accept them firmly. Some of my beliefs are, we might say, on the periphery of my noetic structure. I accept them and may even accept them firmly, but I could give them up without much change elsewhere in my noetic structure. So we have this structure on the beliefs on the periphery that are low in degree of belief that could be given up without, they're not in firm epistemic relation to the beliefs that are within the noetic structure itself. It's kind of like a defeasibility, where if you believe something feasibly, you could possibly give it up by way of a new discovery of something, or a new discovery of new evidence, new data. So these are the kind of epistemic things he is discussing. Now, foundationalism is best construed, I think, as a thesis about rational noetic structures. A noetic structure is rational if it could be the noetic structure of a person who is completely rational. To be completely rational, as I am here using the term, is not to believe only what is true, or to believe all the logical consequences of what one believes, or to believe all necessary truths. Isabel, she's getting in the way. Sorry. Or to believe all necessary truths with equal firmness, or to be uninfluenced by emotion in forming belief. It is instead to do the right thing with respect to one's believings. It is to violate no epistemic duty. So, this is where we have this idea of an epistemic duty. This is kind of a different idea of what is rational. I could say this to an atheist. I could say this, talk about this Plantinga article and say, your idea of what is rational or what is reasonably acceptable or reasonable may not be the end-all be-all of what is rational or what is evidence. And I totally wholeheartedly agree with Plantinga here on what it means for a belief to be rational. It is to not violate any epistemic duties, and it is due to this noetic structure of other beliefs in relation to a certain belief. Let's say I do have a belief in God, that this is one belief or a series of beliefs that is in the heart of my noetic structure. To violate a epistemic duty would be it would be to, like, kind of to do what J.L. Mackie is trying to do in his Evil and Omnipotence, is to have a set of beliefs where that have a contradiction within the same set. It would be to have a certain belief within your structure, and then have another belief there which totally contradicts it, and this is a violation of your epistemic duty. It's a violation of your epistemic duty is mainly just to to violate one of these duties is to hold a belief that does not that is not consistent or acceptable when looking at those beliefs with their relations to other beliefs within the structure. That is the standard of evidence of rationality and reasonable acceptance of beliefs. So I think with this it could be very possible that a certain atheist saying, hey, what you're saying as a theist is not rational because you don't have evidence for it. There very well could be evidence. I'm going to get to why. He goes on and he talks about, let's see if I can forget anything here. He goes on and he talks about notions of proper basicality. Now this is, what he talks about is, I'm trying to remember to be properly basic. What does it mean to be properly basic? Let's see, he has it somewhere, let me find it. Okay, here we go. What is it that characterizes these propositions? Oh, wait, no. Never mind. But how shall we understand the saying that a proposition is true? So we're looking at what does it mean for something to be properly basic. First, there is a epistemic component. A proposition P is self-evident to a person only if S has immediate knowledge of P, and that is knows P and does not know P on the basis of his knowledge of other propositions. So what is being said here is there's a epistemic component in that P is a basic belief for S if S has immediate knowledge of it and knows it, and P is self-evident, and it's known, but not on the basis of other propositions, but on that proposition alone. And then he has another idea that kind of gives me the idea of what I think a basic belief should be, via Locke, John Locke. Locke speaks in this connection of an evident luster. A self-evident proposition, he says, displays a kind of clarity and brightness to the attentive mind. Descartes speaks instead of clarity and distinctness. Each I think is referring to the same phenomenological feature. And this feature is connected with another. Upon understanding a proposition of this sort, one feels strong inclination to accept it. This is luminous obviousness, seems to compel, or at least impel assent. Okay. On evident luster is compared with, is like added on to this, to what I just previously said about the immediate knowledge and knowledge without, on basis of the belief by itself. Evident luster, a luminous obviousness, brightness and clarity to the attentive mind. It's like a basic belief is one that is like this. It has evident luster in that you cannot possibly reject it. You cannot possibly go back on it. When I think about my noetic structure, I think about beliefs that are basic for me, via pretty much this idea of proper basicality, but he goes into complications later. Basically what is going on here is, like I am a Christian and I do believe in God, and one time I tried to actually go back on that. I tried to become atheistic because I didn't like my idea of God. I didn't like, what that idea was doing to me, and I was kind of very misled a little bit. So I tried to really do that, but it didn't really work. I never actually went back on that. That's probably a bad example, but for me, what I would think is a basic belief is one that you could not possibly not believe. It's one that you could not possibly reject. Okay, and then he kind of goes on and he talks about a collapse of foundationalism via problems that he shows. And in the paper I wrote a couple back in November, I wrote a paper which kind of discussed or went against this idea of what Plantinga was. He's kind of breaking down this idea of foundationalism a little bit, and I kind of had an argument which shows that this didn't really follow. The only properly basic propositions are those that are self-evident and or incorrigible, or evident to the senses. That's another way of thinking about it. Incorrigible is a word that it's kind of like something saying that something isn't necessary. You can't really reject it. You can't really think about it otherwise. It couldn't possibly be otherwise given your structure. And then he gives us the proposition 19. A is properly basic for me only if A is self-evident or incorrigible or evident to the senses for me. But many propositions that do not meet these conditions are properly basic for me. I believe, for example, that I had lunch this noon. I do not believe this proposition on the basis of other propositions. I take it as basic. So he's talking about it's kind of like observational data, which says I had lunch this noon. You may think that in fact I do not take this proposition as basic. So he's talking about what the foundations may do. According to the classical foundations, a person S is irrational in accepting that 19 if either 19 is properly basic for him or he believes 19 on the basis of propositions that are properly basic for him. That's important. 19. So 19, this proposition of A is being properly basic if it's evident, if it's incorrigible, evident to the senses, and self-evident. This proposition about this test of proper basicality has to be basic in itself, if it can be the test, I guess. If it can be the test, then it has to be basic itself. And 19, so basically 19 has to meet the standards of being incorrigible, being self-evident, and being evident to the senses. So it's kind of like a cluster F, I don't want to see that. Cluster fuck, if you will. You have to test 19 on the basis of itself. And if 19 is basic, if 19 is basic on this test of itself being basic, then it can be a good standard. Then it can be a good standard for basicality. And Plantinga says that 19 doesn't meet any of its own conditions. And then he objects to natural. I'm going to come back to that pretty quick here. And then he kind of goes about and says, is belief in God properly basic? If belief in God is properly basic, why cannot just any belief be properly basic? Why not say the same on any bizarre aberration we can think of? What about voodoo or astrology? So if belief in God can be basic, why can't voodoo or astrology be this? And according to the reformed epistemologists, certain beliefs are properly basic in certain circumstances via the relations and the beliefs in relation and proximity. Thus, those same beliefs may not be properly basic in other circumstances. Consider the belief that I see a tree. This belief is properly basic in these circumstances that are hard to describe in detail, but include my being appeared to in certain characteristic way. That their same belief may not be properly basic in circumstances, including, say, my knowledge that I am sitting in a living room listening to music with my eyes closed. He's holding that there are widely realized circumstances in which belief in God is properly basic. But why should that be thought to commit him to the idea of that just about any belief in properly basic in any circumstances, or even to the vastly weaker claim that for any belief there are circumstances in which is properly basic? He's saying that just not any claim can end up being properly basic. It has to do with the circumstances as well. If it were in the right, if voodoo were in the right relations and circumstances, it could end up being basic. But it's saying that their belief in God can't just be replaced by any freaking thing. You know? And let's see. For any proposition A and person S, A is probably basic for S, if and only if A is incorrigible for S, or self-evident to S. The fact is, I think that neither to what I just said, nor any other revealing necessary and sufficient condition of proper basicality follows from purely self-evident premises by clearly acceptable arguments, and hence the proper way to arrive at such a criterion is, broadly speaking, inductive. So, by saying that this is inductive, he's saying that the way of coming about beliefs that exist. This could be because I've seen various purple elephants in various other premises. Also, a premise being other people have seen various purple elephants. Then the conclusion could be purple elephants live everywhere on the earth. That could be a problem because that's only based on empirical evidence, based on things that people, myself, and others have seen. So that could be a problem because it doesn't cover everything. It doesn't metaphysically cover everything. But this, what is meant by this proper basicality and coming to properly basic beliefs, is that we find them by basically finding them and experiencing them and analyzing them. We must assemble examples of beliefs and conditions such that the former are obviously properly basic in the latter, and examples of beliefs and conditions such that the former are obviously not properly basic in the latter. We must then frame hypotheses as to the necessary and sufficient conditions of proper basicality to test these hypotheses by reference to those examples. So we have to test proper basicality by what we have seen as properly basic. We have to gain hypotheses based on what we've seen as basic, and go from there. So, what I'm thinking, there's a couple questions here. As to what is proper basicality? What is a proper basic belief? And is belief in faith in God basic? If belief in God is not basic, then it would be more difficult to claim it as rational. We probably could via other basic beliefs. if we were to declare it as, if we were to declare belief in God as non-basic, that would we would have to analyze the basic beliefs it's in relation to within the whole noetic structure, and then we would have to go from there to figure out, is this rational or not. But the truth is that people don't believe in God from non-basic perspective or non-basic beliefs. They are, atheists are not converted into theists based upon argument and empirical evidence. They're converted based on feelings, mental events, and also just leaps of faith, basically, and things that make their belief in God so strong that they're basic, that it couldn't be otherwise. They are necessary. It could not be other than that for them in their noetic structure from then on. So the question first is, are beliefs basic? The problem has shown with 19 for Plantinga is that a belief is basic within 19 if it is self-evident, thus one knows it. It is not known on basis of other beliefs, and it is incorrigible or evident to the senses. The variations of all that. And Plantinga says that standard for basic beliefs has to be itself also basic. So it has to pass its own test. And does it entirely? Not really. I have thought that before, that it did, that it has passed that test, but I don't see how that's incorrigible. I don't see how that's evident to the senses. And then there's also the issue of how a belief like I had lunch at noon is basic, but doesn't even fit those tests. There should be more of a standard that fits things like those, that I guess would have to deal with beliefs that are not evident now, but were evident and are still kind of fresh in your mind. Like if you want to go into temporal lingo, there's a lot of stuff in phenomenology and continental thought on that. But I would say that there are basic beliefs. My personal standard for basic beliefs, and I would say that I would agree with Plantinga that basic beliefs and figuring out what is a basic belief is a process that is inductive. We go about finding basic beliefs by basically finding them, discovering them. It's kind of it's kind of interesting, but I would say that also it's not all the way inductive in that of the idea of this evident luster that Plantinga got from Locke, John Locke. He says that beliefs that can have evident luster, luminous obviousness, brightness, and clarity. There are beliefs that I have that, and as well as many others have this, that are luminously obvious, bright and clear, that they are necessary. Basically, they necessary within your noetic structure. They couldn't be other than that. And I would say that is the only deductive standard that works for basic beliefs. And then you could probably think about that as to what justifies that, and there would be no other real beliefs that could really justify it, and it would have this evident luster that would, make it stick out among your other beliefs within your structure. So I could probably go on and on talking about notions of proper basicality. That's one thing I could probably talk about for a while. And I probably will once I actually get into the heart of epistemology. But this video is kind of about, is faith in God rational? Plantinga says it is. He has issues with basicality and foundationalism, and he kind of goes back and forth on that as to whether beliefs in God are basic. But here's my opinion, and I highly recommend you read this article. This book is a great book to get if you want to read a lot of stuff on philosophy of religion. Philosophy of Religion is a great book. Is a great field study of philosophy. It's like kind of like an intersection of logic, metaphysics, epistemology, language, even, and sometimes even mathematics, philosophy of mathematics. But I highly recommend you read that article. And after this, I'll probably do Alston at some point. And I'll get also, there's also an article in here which is about, which is a critique of Plantinga's epistemology. Okay, so is faith in God rational? And I would say that if you can have some kind of case as to why a belief in God is basic, then you can say that it is rational. If you can't, then you have to go around some other way, which you can, actually. A belief in God being at the, if you're a foundationalist, if a belief in God is at the bottom of your noetic structure, and then other beliefs build on that, then I would say that your belief in God is basic. For all Christians, and I know that because I know and have known many Christians, and I am myself a Christian, and my whole family is Christians. So I know what the noetic structure of the theist is, of the Christian theist specifically is. It starts with a belief in God that has evident luster, luminous obviousness, clarity, and brightness. It is, I would say, it is evident to the senses, and it is incorrigible, and self-evident. So I would say that the belief in God with Christian theists passes this number 19 test that he has in here. So in my opinion, all beliefs in God are basic because they are incorrigible. That's the big word. They're incorrigible and they have evident luster. For the theist of any kind, really, it could not be other than God existing. So, and I'm one of those who believes that God's existence is at the bottom of my noetic structure, and my other beliefs build on that, just like the beliefs on abortion and homosexuality and all that other stuff. I'm kind of different on the homosexuality thing, but beliefs in what you should do with your time and such. Those things build for a theist on the belief in God. So is belief in God rational? His case is that it is, because it is there in strong relation with other beliefs and on those epistemic relations. And because of the circumstances of the noetic structure of the theist, then it is rational. It's rational because it's not violating epistemic duty. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. So my test of rationality, reasonable acceptability, reasonableness, and evidence, basically, comes from him. comes from Plantinga in his epistemology. And whether belief is rational or not comes from these circumstances in the epistemic relation and your noetic structure, and as to whether any epistemic duties are violated by that belief. If not, then it is rational. And as a theist, I would say that a Islamic jihad terrorist, his beliefs are rational because they are at the center or bottom of his noetic structure, based upon his mental events and such. So, even like a psychosis by this could be possibly not entirely irrational. So people could be wrong. It's not a thing that is... Rationality in this test is not testing as to whether it's true, as to whether it's not really like a correspondence theory. A correspondence theory says that something is true, evident, reasonable, if it corresponds, if this is a proposition that corresponds to something real, a property, particular state of affairs in the world. And for that, if it doesn't, then it is not rational. But for this, for Plantinga, if it violates the epistemic duty within epistemic relations and circumstances within one's noetic structure, then if it doesn't violate any epistemic duties, then it does not. Then it is rational. Let me know your thoughts. If you need some more clarity on this, I can definitely do that.